That's real shocking. If there was a warning, I'm confused. Yes, because that's a simple fact. He misplaying. He putting down cards that y'all clearly can see, and then y'all not saying anything. I had to tell him he can't do that. Y'all wasn't even paying attention.
What's going on, everybody? It's YCS here, coming at you with a brand new video. So unless you've been living under a rock for the past few months, you'll know that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is probably in a very awkward spot right now, with most decks basically just being piles of the same engines doing the same thing that cost quite a pretty penny. Yeah, it's just a very gross game state for a lot of people at the moment. While the gameplay overall seems to be pretty samey with these top decks though, there is still a hierarchy when it comes to their ladder ranking, at least enough for me to make a video. So with that said, welcome to my top 5 competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks for the April 2022 format. Before we get into this list, as always, remember that this video is going to be based off my opinions, the opinions of people in the community, as well as statistics and things like that, and the placement of each deck over each other is completely subjective, so with that in mind, be sure not to harass me, any other content creators, or anyone in anyone's comment sections, as it's completely unnecessary, and at the end of the day, it's just a card game. But enough rambling, let's go ahead and get right into it. Starting us off at number 5, Flunderies is an incredible strategy right now. Being able to set up 2 floodgates in the form of both Empen and Barrier Statue is really good, believe it or not. The deck is also doing really good in events right now competitively, stealing 4 top 32 slots at YCS Charlotte, and I believe 1 slot in top 8, which is really nice to see, and this can possibly be contributed to the fact that they just got their quick play spell card in Battle of Chaos, Flunderies in the Advent of Adventure, which allows them to dodge things like Valor and Imperm quite easily, something that they struggled with before and that really hindered them in events. Speaking of hand traps though, they have access to quite possibly one of the most broken ones in the game, being Dimension Shifter. Not only can this just outright win you the game, especially when you're being forced to go second, the deck actually has the ability to loop it multiple times, unlike a lot of other decks, with things like Flunderies Stree, being able to banish excess cards from your graveyard that you don't need in order to make it empty again for another Dimension Shifter to be dropped at a moment's notice. The deck overall is in a great spot right now and is seeing a lot more representation, which is only going to inevitably spike with the reprint of Rise of the Mega Monarch coming and goes from the past to the second Haunting, which will definitely make the deck a lot more accessible and affordable for more players. Now at number 4, we're going to have Tenyi Sword Soul. So Tenyi Sword Soul is an interesting case because it's actually passively dropped a few slots in our terms of our tier list compared to the last tier list, I believe, despite having basically no hits on the last ban list and getting new support in Battle of Chaos that makes it even better. Despite this though, it's still seeing monumental event success with things like the Punk engine and the Halka Fibrax engine, allowing the deck to extend through hand traps very well, which is something that it may have struggled with before, considering that it only really had 2 small engines that committed their normal summon. The Punk cards are actually very good in the deck, allowing you to get access to Halka Fibrax even easier, even though it was already being played in the deck, so now you don't really have to worry about hard opening Ecclesia or Adhar or anything like that. Plus, if you feel like it, you can actually play the Madam Spider Punk, which allows you to get a free Imperm essentially. Sword Soul was already a fine deck before, however the introduction of the Hulk package in basically every deck list now has allowed the deck to extend to monumental heights, mainly due to things like Yazi not only being able to do things on your turn, being able to get blown up by the Auroradon and then floating into your Taya or your Moye, but also being able to go second very well, blowing itself up and something on the opponent's field while also still floating into the aforementioned starter cards. Even if you don't feel like shelling out a lot of money on a Hulk package, which is still at least probably over $100 even with the reprint on the horizon, you can also play the deck with Mare, which allows you to end off on Tenyi Spirit Sarasara, which essentially locks your opponent out of targeting any effect monsters on the field for battle or card effects, and yes, that includes their own, while also being a 3k body that can copy a token of a monster on the field. If you would like to see both a Mare deck list and an updated Halka Fibrax deck list for this deck, be sure to check out the Mare deck list already up on the channel from our good friend M-Rocket, and let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see his Halka Fibrax engine, as he has actually gotten it just a little bit after releasing our last video with the Mare package. He did actually utilize the Mare package in order to win the top OTS championship mat at our locals, and so be sure to click on that annotation and help support the channel. Coming in at number 3, we have Eldritch. Now, Pure or Cybers, this deck is admittedly very good. Pure was the variant that ended up making it to top 2, being piloted by Jerome, in a very unfortunately scuffed matchup, but everyone was rightfully stunned that Eldritch, being pure for the most part, was able to make its way all the way up into the final match. This build utilizes things like Gozen Match very effectively, especially considering the sheer amount of prank kids that were there, but also being able to use their skill drains and other things as well, and making sure to play around the Draco back as well, considering the adventure engine is all over the place. Even if you don't feel like playing pure Eldritch though, what if I told you that the deck has a 1-card Scythe Lock? That's right, the Cyberse build actually allows you to Scythe Lock with just a single card, being Cyberse Gadget, or I believe Dotscaper can actually do it too, which not only will give you that Scythe Lock, but also 4 other cards that could potentially just be things that you set and hope your opponent doesn't have anything to out it. It's overall a very versatile deck, being able to play things like DPE, adventure packages, of course the Cyber stuff, or just being able to be played pure on its own. The deck really just has a grab bag of things going for it, and so it can do a lot of different things very well. Coming in at number 2, we have Based. Based, for those of you that somehow don't know by this point, is basically the deck that spawned the whole pile gimmick that's going around right now, taking just about every single good engine, including Hulk and Punk and Tenyi and DPE, Scythe Lock and Adventure and Magician Souls and Rose Dragons, and you just cram them all into this random 60 card pile mash with anywhere from like 12 to 20 hand traps combined in there. Yeah, sounds fun, doesn't it? Essentially, this deck takes everything that's good from all the other pile decks running around right now and just slaps it all together and it makes it work. And yet it still fucking works! How does this deck work? With every possible contingency covered by this deck, you can go first or second perfectly fine, with a million different routes covered in case you get hand trapped by, you know, literally anything, because everything's running every hand trap in the main right now. Overall, it's a perfect example of one of the many problems with modern Yu-Gi-Oh! At the moment, with all of these generic good stuff engines with little to no restrictions on them whatsoever, being able to be combined to make quite possibly the best deck. And to think, we saw Branded Fusion and the Therians on their way to make things worse. Basically, until the next Forbidden Limited list drops, we're gonna be dealing with these style of decks for a long time. Usually for these kinds of lists, I actually do honorable mentions, however, there would be way too many to actually put in here due to the sheer amount of coverage that, you know, the Adventure engine and DP engine and the Scythe Lock engine and all of that cover. So I won't be doing anything of that sort in this video in particular. But one more thing though before we do get to our number 1 slot is that be sure to leave a like if you did enjoy it so far, as it really helps put the video and the channel into YouTube recommended. And if you really like the content, you want to see more like it, I do top lists just about every other month in terms of the top 5s, and I do tier lists and other things like that all the time. Then perhaps consider subscribing because it supports the channel more than anything else and it's completely free. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get right to the final pick. Ladies and gentlemen, our number 1 competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck for the April 2022 format is, you guessed it, Prank Kids. Prank Kids is an absolute monster of a strategy right now, even snagging first place at YCS Charlotte, even though the top cut was very, very scuffed. The deck went into a sort of small dormancy after its limiting of Prank Kids Meow Meow Mew, but it's seeing massive success again after the release of the Adventure engine, which not only allows coverage from hand traps that would immediately stop your turn otherwise with your 1-card combos, but also makes it to where you get an extra disruption and don't really have to worry about having to follow up as much. However, just the impact of that small engine, and of course, you know, an added DPE, because why not? The deck managed to steal 10 out of the top 32 slots of YCS Charlotte. That's roughly a third of the whole top cut. I think another main thing that actually contributes to the success the deck is currently seeing is the sheer representation of it, with a lot of even really skilled players such as Raphael Neverett, even though he was already on it, messing around with the deck, as well as players that may not be so competitive but also just wanted a relatively budget deck, and say they already had the Adventure engine laying around, because let's face it, you're probably not going to be in a very good situation for physical cards right now, with a lot of really large physical events still closed. If I recall correctly, this is the first in-person YCS we've had in America. But yeah, double Regeki, Omni Negate, and non-targeting pop with a million different ways to grind and potentially up to a 60-card deck of your own with a million hand traps slapped in as well. Prank Kids are doing absolutely amazing right now, and yeah, it's a big powerhouse of the format. Prank Kids are the deck to beat. Thank you all so much for watching my top 5 competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks for April 2022 post-YCS Charlotte. I do hope you all enjoyed. Remember, if you did, be sure to leave a like, as it really helps the channel out in terms of the algorithm. And subscribe if you want to see more content from me. I do Yu-Gi-Oh! Content all the time. I'm trying to make this my job if possible, and it would mean the absolute world to me. But with that out of the way, that's going to have to do it for the video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.